Witness Live, and I'm Monique Coleman. As you know, Earth Day is this coming Monday. So today we are live at the YouTube Next Lab talking about how youth are fighting climate change and advocating for our basic human rights. Joining me in the studio are Michaela Comas, say hello, a youth climate activist with Global Kids. We've also got Kelli Matheson, a lawyer and program manager at Witness, and also Pushker Kharecha, a climate scientist at the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies and the Columbia University Earth Institute. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't know that there even was an Earth Institute, so we're all going to be learning a lot today. And welcome to all of you that are joining us through this stream. This is going to be a really dynamic and wonderful conversation, and we want you to know that we want you to participate in this conversation. So please use the hashtag #WitnessLive. Tweet at us, send us questions on Facebook. There will be a time where we're going to get really interactive. But first, I have a question for you, Pushker. We've all heard about climate change, but we want to know, is it real? What's going to happen to the planet if we don't stabilize the climate?
Yes, it's very real. We're very certain of that, and we're also very certain based on numerous lines of scientific evidence gathered over many decades by thousands of climate scientists from around the world that human activities are the dominant cause of climate change over the past 50 years at least, and indefinitely into the future as long as we keep burning fossil fuels. So fossil fuels are around 80% of the problem, and deforestation, the land use changes, are the rest of the problem.
Okay, so if fossil fuels are 80% of the problem, can you clarify for those of us that aren't exactly sure what you mean by that? What are fossil fuels?
Yeah, fossil fuels very simply just coal, oil, and natural gas. They've been built up in the climate system for hundreds of millions of years, and we're burning them at a rate that's many orders of magnitude faster than they can be replenished. And so we're severely disrupting the carbon cycle, and therefore the climate system.
So what sort of things can we expect based on this? Like, what kind of things would we see, just like the average person? Like, how would I know that climate change is happening?
Right. So the changes that we've seen so far are relatively small, but the changes that could come in the future could be huge. But even the small changes that have already occurred have caused very disruptive events around the world. And I like to list 5 extreme weather and climate-related events: droughts, wildfires, heat waves, storms, and floods. Now, all of these things have worsened over the past several decades. If we could cut to the first slide, please. And so it's very clear that at least one, if not most, of the key properties of these 5 categories of extreme events has worsened. And the various key properties are the duration, that is how long they last, the spatial extent, the area that they affect, the number, and the severity, how strong they are. So all of these things, one or more of these things have gotten worse for all these extreme events, and they will continue to get worse. Maybe all of them will continue to get worse for all events if we keep on the course we are on now.
But there is something that we can do about it. We'll get to that a little bit later. Kelli, clearly the things that we were just discussing affect us, right? It affects us every single day. It affects our environment. But how is this related to our human rights?
I think a friend of mine whose name is Ashley Funk, she's 18 years old, she sums it up best. Environmental health is human health. So if you think about Hurricane Sandy, and Hurricane Sandy was likely intensified by climate change. You think about the basic rights that impacted. Our right to education was impacted because some of us couldn't go to school. Our right to health was impacted because hospitals were shut down. Our food was threatened, our clean water was threatened, our houses were destroyed. Some people couldn't work during a long period of time, and some people even made the ultimate sacrifice, which was their life, because people died in that storm. But I want to make a very important point, and it's that the youth are going to be impacted the most. And youth all around the world are already being impacted. And there's youth right here in the United States that I actually want to introduce you to. And they've already been impacted by climate change, but they're doing something about it. So I'm hoping you can play a short clip introducing you to some of the youth that are actually bringing legal action against the government.
When I was first going to college and I started to be exposed to the issue of climate change and the science of climate change, I came to realize that that was going to be probably the defining issue of my generation and of the generations to follow.
It's mostly about the winter coming late. The warmer temperatures are causing the permafrost to melt, and the permafrost to melt affects the land through erosion. This year we lost about 8 feet. In the next few years, and we might have to move our house.
When it's too hot, the water dries up, and then there's nothing. There's no water. These are my goats and my sheep. We raise them for food in the winter. They could get dehydrated if they don't have water.
There are hundreds of homes that burnt in the fire. We were on air alert for like 2 weeks after that. It was definitely something that affected all of us in some way. It changed people's lives forever.
Thank you so much for sharing that video with us. Michaela, first of all, how old are you?
I'm 16.
Okay. So it's safe to say that you're representing the youth voice
Yes.
here right now with us. What made you decide to become a climate activist?
Well, I live in an environmentally burdened neighborhood, which means that if you compare it to a neighborhood that's, I say that it's in Manhattan, which is better kept, has safer air, has safer water access, has safer food as well. Their food is healthier. And then if you compare it to mine, our food isn't that healthy. Our air is hazardous. Our water is polluted. So that kind of made me go.
So basically, like your personal experience, the fact that you're looking around, you know, you get out of your neighborhood a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're going over there. You know, we like to say the grass isn't greener on the other side, but sometimes maybe the grass might be a little greener.
Yeah.
Right? It might be a little bit more well
Most
kept.
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know, that's it was your own personal experience, but by being a climate activist, you know, that's reaching a very broad number of people. How do you think that climate change specifically is going to affect your generation?
Well, first of all, we are most definitely going to be dealing with an environmental crisis in the future, and I believe that my generation has to prepare and take the steps in order for us to say that we have to make sure that we have the right frame of mind, that we're basically gonna have a problem, that we're gonna have to take safer precautions, you know, use less emissions and fossil fuels, and just be like environmentally conscious
responsible.
overall.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's what you're representing.
Yeah.
You know, being responsible, being aware, but then also being active. You know, this is a great opportunity to really raise awareness about these issues. And, you know, as a climate activist, that's one of the things that you're doing, but you are an activist, not just an inspirer, you know, so that means that you're active. And, you know, I think a lot of people don't really know what they can do to be active. So I want to raise this question to Pushker. How can we stop or at least slow climate change?
Well, to put things in a sort of big picture context, the levels of atmospheric greenhouse gases that we currently can measure are at unprecedented levels in at least the last 800,000 years and most likely several million years. So we have to reduce those levels of greenhouse gases as soon as possible. Specifically, recent work by my colleagues and me shows that the level of the most important atmospheric greenhouse gas that humans produce, which is carbon dioxide or CO2, that's right now it's about 394 parts per million in the atmosphere. And our work shows that it has to be reduced to about 350 parts per million by around the end of the century. And in order to do that, that's a huge undertaking, but in order to do that, it is doable. We have to reduce fossil fuel CO2 emissions from all three fuels on average 6% per year over the next several decades. And on top of that, we need improvements in land use practices to the scale of about the size of the Amazon forest's worth of carbon. So yeah, all that has to be done within this century. And can we put up the next slide, please? Okay, so the resulting atmospheric CO2 levels are shown on the left graph, and that's the scenario we think is the best one that will help us to stabilize the climate and therefore protect future generations and so on. The scenarios on the right show what would happen if we continued on the present course, business as usual, fossil fuel CO2 emissions. And basically, in a nutshell, it's an entirely different planet, one in which life would be severely disrupted for human society and natural ecosystems. For instance, if we wait even another decade or so, the level of emissions cuts required to meet that target of 350 ppm by around the end of the century makes it basically impractical to achieve that target. So yeah, we call for given the scale and the urgency of the problem, we call for these massive coordinated actions around the world. It's going to be very, very challenging, but it's doable.
So it's a little bit more than just turning off the lights and recycling.
Right,
Okay.
right.
I mean, I know that it's kind of a joke, but the reality is I think a lot of people reduce this idea of climate change to simple things like that. And I think, those things are important, but what you're talking about is something massive. It's something that has to be coordinated and also put into policy as well, that we have to get governments behind this. So, Kelli, I just honestly, recently learned about the Trust Campaign, and that basically works with youth activists who are bringing legal action against the United States government over climate change. Okay, that's for real. That's for real, okay? I love the youths. Can you explain how this works?
Yeah, it's super exciting because our youth recognize, as you saw in the video clip and talking to Michaela, that when the climate is destabilized, our whole lives are destabilized. So in honor of Mother's Day in 2011, youth, with the support of scientists and lawyers, brought legal action against all 50 state governments and the U.S. government for our leaders' collective failure to protect the atmosphere and ensure that our youth have a sustainable future. And their legal claim is very, very simple. Back a long time ago, there became this law. It's called the Public Trust Doctrine. And it's actually quite simple. All it says is that the government has an obligation, a trust obligation, to protect our air and our water for ourselves and for future generations. And if you think about it, if your grandparents set up a trust for you for college, and your parents are the trustee, they're supposed to take care of that money. And they go out and they buy themselves a Lamborghini,
Ooh,
right?
Mama and Daddy.
Yeah.
I'll be mad at you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have no more money. That is
Wow.
against the law. You don't have that trust fund that your grandparents set up for you to go to college. This is the same situation. The government is responsible to take care of our air and our water. They're allowing our fossil fuel industry to ruin it, all of the companies out there. And that's illegal. It is protected. The government has an obligation to take care of our air and our water for not only me, but for Michaela.
Wow, that's really powerful. Michaela, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that essentially you're inheriting all of these issues, and you're going to be, you're going to outlive a lot of people, and how will taking this legal action help you, your family, and the world?
Well, I think that it's going to, establish environmental justice. And basically what Kelli is getting into is that everybody will have, equal rights to air, water, and land. And I believe that that's essential for everybody because, like, where I live, our food isn't that healthy for us. And when I go to the store, I know that I have to check the expiration date because some of that food is expired. But when I go to Trader Joe's in Manhattan or downtown Brooklyn, which is, again, it doesn't have, is less environmentally burdened than my neighborhood, that I don't have to check the expiration date because I know that that food is well kept. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have one question for all of you. It takes many small actions before we can start to see bigger changes. So as a scientist, lawyer, and youth activist, what are some concrete actions that people in our communities can take against these issues?
Okay, I guess also. So Monique, you pointed out some of them, like related to the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah.
That's important.
I like those.
Yeah. So those are great. But But yeah, we need much more than that. I mean, the things, small actions will help. Things like things that most people have heard about, like changing our light bulbs from incandescent to fluorescent bulbs, and driving more fuel-efficient cars, and not wasting energy at home, and so on. And one thing I should add that's not often pointed out, but it's very important. In fact, Jim Hansen and others call it possibly the most significant personal action people can take, and that is to shift our diets away from animal products. And there's a growing body of scientific literature that supports that notion, and it's rooted in some very basic facts. One is that livestock production accounts for about 70% of the world's agricultural land, so the world's agricultural land covers about 40% of the Earth's ice-free land surface, and of that 40% that's used in agriculture worldwide, 70% is used just to raise livestock.
Okay,
and,
hold on one second.
Yeah.
We're talking about livestock. We're talking about cows.
Cows,
chickens,
yeah.
Animals that we eat.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure that I had lost you there. We're talking about,
Exactly.
okay, so a lot of the food that's produced is going to the animals.
That's right. In fact, most of the crops that we
Oh.
produce are consumed by animals and not by humans.
Uh-oh.
So that consumption of both land and crops for livestock production implies instantly that just by shifting our diet a little, it doesn't mean everyone has to go vegetarian, although
Right.
that would help more. But yeah, but yeah, any amount we can do would help, and especially in developed countries where meat consumption is currently the highest. But basically, yeah. So because the carbon and land footprint of livestock production is so large, shifting diets away from animal products could really help
That's a great one.
mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and free up land that we need for achieving that Amazon scale reforestation that I mentioned earlier.
Totally.
And but I should say that small scale actions are great and they would help. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. What's really needed are both the combination of that and large scale top down actions, meaning policy changes. And I think Kelly's going to talk about
Yeah,
some of
please
those.
tell us a little bit
Well,
about that.
that's what I would like to encourage. As Pushker said, personal actions are invaluable. But just like we have a financial plan, just like we have a budget, just like we have a plan for a summer break, just like we have a study plan, the U.S. government has yet to create a plan to address the climate crisis. So the youth that are bringing the legal action against the United States, so that's what they're asking for. That's all they're asking for. They're asking the government to come up with a comprehensive climate recovery plan so that we can have a healthy atmosphere, and we want that plan to be based on science. Science that comes from our world's top climate scientists, instead of that plan being based on what the oil and gas companies want.
Okay. Thank you. What about you, my love? Concrete action.
Well, I just
Speak to the youth.
well, I just think that everybody should actually speak about it, because I feel that, climate change is something that everybody knows about, but they don't actually say that. Oh my gosh, this is like a hidden behind the scenes topic,
Right.
and if you speak about it, that means that you're gonna obviously the government is going to hear it, and once the government hears it, then they're gonna have to take a step towards it. I mean, I like to relate it to gun control. Since Sandy, people have talked about it, and they're like, we want change, and obviously the government is taking actions. Actions that might not be in favor of us, but obviously it's something.
Yeah, everyone raised really great actions, whether it be taking it with policy makers and really going after the government and saying, all we want is a plan, just give us a concrete plan, or saying, listen, we need to raise awareness, we need to talk about it. If you don't stop talking about it, we'll eventually hear it. Or, talking about just animal products. It's something as simple as that. These are things that I can put into my mind and I can go out and do. One thing, and we're about to open it up for questions, so please get your questions ready. One thing that I thought of while we were having this discussion, honestly, is innovation. That's the thing, is that I think a lot of times, we want to make sure that we also have a compassionate ear to the fact that the reality is that I'm reading my questions off of this phone, and the impact that this could potentially be having on the environment, and the exponential rate at which we have grown in terms of innovation and technology is also having an impact. And so I think that there's going to need to be somewhat of a shift in our consciousness as we are creating businesses, as you know, that we're making green businesses, that the industrial revolutions that are happening, you know, all over the world as this, you know, 7 billion is brought into the economy and so forth, that we are thinking forward. And you know, it's really, we got to go back and fix some things, but we also want to make sure that this generation is bringing this awareness into every single device that you create and thing that you do as well. So, do we have any questions?
We sure do.
Yeah, I
Hello,
love that.
everybody. Hi.
Welcome.
So, there you go.
Okay, great.
Let you guys.
So I'm assuming these questions came off of the
the Witness Live
Witness Live. Awesome.
hashtag.
Okay, this is a great question. Politicians have short-term incentives and views compared to long-term impacts of climate change. How can we combat this? I'm looking right at you. I didn't even need to, but like we just locked eyes. You can take it, Kelly.
Oh, that is it's such a challenging question, and it's such an important question.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons why the youth are going to the judiciary. Youth cannot vote. Youth cannot serve in Congress. Youth cannot be delegates inside the UN talks. They can go and they have their voice heard in all of these spaces. But the judiciary is the one space that is open to our youth to hear how our government is basically, they're breaking the law. The legislature is breaking the law. The executive branch is breaking the law. And the judicial branch is the branch that can think long term. And so that is why we're taking the approach with the Trust campaign, as well as empowering youth through film, as well as empowering youth through on-the-ground activism, because all these different tools have to work together. But we really need the judiciary to step up and tell the government to do its job.
Can you explain to me a little bit what you mean by the judiciary for those who?
If you look back on the days of segregation, a lot of people know about this case called Brown versus Board of Education. And what happened there was very simply the government was violating the law because the schools were segregated. So the civil rights movement went to the courts and said, you know, this is not okay. We can't have a segregated society. And the court there agreed. They said, you're violating the law. You're violating the 14th Amendment. And we don't care how you desegregate the schools, but you need to come up with a plan to desegregate the schools.
So that's what you mean, taking it up with the court.
Yeah, exactly.
I see.
So just as we needed a plan to desegregate the schools, we need a plan to protect the atmosphere.
And it's that serious.
That's serious.
It's more serious, really.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with the viewer's point that governments around the world, including ours, are just completely in the pockets of major business interests, in this case, fossil fuel industry. And really, as Kelly mentioned, there's legal avenues, and I've gone on record supporting those. I've submitted a couple depositions to some of the trust cases. But yeah, we also need the governments around the world we need grassroots pressure, really, to remind our leaders that it's not just about serving private business interests, but they have to serve public interests. And what we need people specifically to remind our elected leaders to do is to level the playing field. Right now it's heavily tilted in favor of fossil fuels. And we need to put a fair yet effective and rising price on carbon emissions based on the simple principle of make the polluter pay. And we need to end subsidies to fossil fuels around the world.
And
that will open up the market to alternative non-fossil energies.
Is there a fossil fuel specifically that is like the most?
Yeah, so some of our published papers, recent published papers, have pointed the finger at coal as the biggest culprit.
Okay.
If you look at the cumulative CO2 emissions over the industrial era,
Coal.
the largest single fraction is from coal.
And where do we
it's
use
about
coal?
50%. Coal is mainly used for electric power generation.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, anyone
So
at home...
every day.
Exactly.
Every day.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, anyone at home wanting to reduce use of coal can reduce their use of electricity, because very likely it's coming
Okay.
from, part of that's coming from coal. And the good news is, because it's because power plants are single, large point sources, we can target those with alternative energies very effectively.
Great. How can you make people care about climate change when it doesn't affect their immediate needs? I think that's one for you.
Okay. Well, I like to hit them personally. Well,
Okay.
not actually physically hit them, but
Right.
hit them in
No bullying. Okay. We'll talk about that one in the next witness slide. Yeah.
their personal cause.
Okay.
So I'm currently working on with other group of kids on a campaign that puts green roofs on all public schools in New York City.
Green roofs.
Green roofs.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And although some people may not know what green roofs are and what the use of them might be, like how they might impact that person, like straight directly.
Right.
I always like to say that, what if your cousin has asthma? I know that if that child has asthma, then the green roofs will help lower the air pollutants in that whole area,
Okay.
and therefore help that kid's asthma, decrease.
So you make it personal.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm gonna take this up with you, because the question says when it doesn't affect your immediate needs, but it actually does affect your immediate needs, whether it be through food or, like asthma. So many different things that we experience on a day-to-day basis actually could be directly an effect of climate change. So you hit them where it hurts. That's good, or where it feels good.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I think it's sometimes hard to see, but we created a series called Stories of Trust, calling for climate recovery. That's part of the Trust campaign. And it's the lives of 9 young people in this country and how they are being impacted by climate change now. And if you watch those films, and you can go to ourchildrenstrust.org to watch those films, you'll start to see how really your life is impacted by climate change too, but you just don't know it. So you do need someone to help you open your eyes to see how you and your family and your communities are actually being impacted.
You actually started to answer this next question. It says, I'd like to be a youth activist. Is there a way for me to join the Trust campaign?
Yeah. Go ahead.
They're both.
Yeah,
There's
go.
absolutely a way to join the Trust campaign and actually to work with global kids, or actually do both.
Okay.
Love it.
Tell us a little bit, so that, I'm sure there's a lot of young people that are watching right now. When they log off in 3 minutes, what can they do?
I think first go to ourchildrenstrust.org and contact just info@ourchildrenstrust.org, and they will get back to you with all sorts of different options of how you can get involved, from becoming a youth plaintiff here in New York City if you would like to screening the films at your school. And then also go to...
you could just look around your neighborhood and just see what are some environmental problems that I can help fix. And then just go out, get a group of friends, and just go ahead and fix it. It's not that hard.
And you're here representing global kids as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I'm part of ASHAP, and we do human rights work, which is also environmental problems is also human rights problems.
Which we learned earlier.
Yeah. So we try and help other people through advocating for certain things.
Great.
And if you're internationally, the public trust doctrine applies in your country too. Your government has an obligation to protect the air and water. So again, call ourchildrenstrust.org, because we're expanding internationally this summer.
Wonderful.
So
we have time for one last question. What do we need to do on a political level? Okay, so we're just gonna imagine that President Obama is watching, or could potentially watch, because we're gonna make enough noise, we're gonna raise enough awareness, we're gonna, really do that grassroots level advocacy, and he's gonna hear about this. What do we want? What is the message? What is the thing that we actually want to get on the political level?
Okay, well, as I mentioned before, that we really need to remind our public leaders that they are here to serve our interests, the public interests, not private business interests. And grassroots activism is an excellent way to do that, and legal actions are an excellent way to do that. And, if people want to go out and do it, there's another avenue of activism that people can follow, which is just trying to block things like the Keystone XL pipeline, which would promote the use of unconventional fossil fuels. And in addition to targeting coal, which I mentioned earlier, we have to prevent unconventional fossil fuels from being extracted and used on a widespread basis. Right now they're a very small fraction, but they could be much bigger because the resources are vast if we don't stop things like the Keystone XL pipeline.
Great. Anything quickly?
I would love everyone to write President Obama and tell him to switch sides. Right now, when I walk into courtroom 117 in U.S. District Court, it's President Obama's lawyers sitting side by side with 12,000 members of the fossil fuel industry versus our kids. Tell him to switch sides and protect the atmosphere instead of protect industry's interest in polluting in an unrestrained manner. Tell him to fight for our youth.
say that you want a safer planet. I mean, the way that we're going is not looking good for any of us right now. So just say that if we need to get our act together, basically, and we need to make sure that in the future that my grandchildren and your great grandchildren can have a
Why I gotta be my great?
No, I'm kidding. Can have a place that it's okay to live in, and they don't have to worry about any of the problems that we're worrying about right now. So.
Yeah. Thank you all so much,
Thank
and
you,
thank
Monique.
you all for tuning in. I think one thing that we all know is that social media is an incredibly powerful and impactful tool that we use every single day to show people what we're eating. All right, I mean, let's be real about it. But we can do so much more. Share the video. Go on the website. What's the website again?
Our Children's Trust.
Go to ourchildrenstrust.org. Ourchildrenstrust.org. Watch the video. Watch it a few times and share that video using the hashtag #WitnessLive and really just make some noise. You don't have to, be somebody that this is. I'm someone who I just care. I don't always know what to do, but you can do something. It can start with those grassroots things and those little things like turning out the lights and switching. Little things that we can do, but then on a big way, you can become a part of this trust campaign and make the government really be accountable for the environment, for this generation, and for many generations to come. Thank you so much for tuning in to Witness Live. This has been really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. You're wonderful. What are you guys doing later? Do you guys want to go to a vegetarian restaurant?
Yeah, see, that's the one problem. You could do
Yeah.
a guilt trip. People could feel like guilty.
Oh, no worries. I was recently learning about.
But sometimes people need to feel guilty, frankly. So
I feel you.
if there's that much in you.
all say yeah, Witness Live?
Yeah.
We all can.
On cue?
On cue. 2, 3.
Yeah, Witness Live!